Hello and welcome to the Blue Shadow Podcast. My name is Joey.
I'm Dan, and welcome to this week's installment of Star Wars is Alive. Today we're really going to focus on our favorite lightsaber duels.
Woohoo!
So, integral part of Star Wars, the lightsabers. We've really got to see them grow and evolve since the original trilogy. And so Joey and I compiled a list of our favorite lightsaber duels. So the way this is set up, we each picked our top 5 with an honorable mention as our 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited about my list. I know Joey's excited about his list.
100%. And I think they really highlight how different we are as Star Wars fans, which is exciting.
The duality of Star Wars fans.
It's true. And also uniting at the same time.
Yeah.
I think I'm excited for us to talk about why we love these fights.
Me too.
And there may be things that are omitted that we even know are omitted.
Yeah.
And we feel bad about it. But
we will address it at the end.
Yes.
The one specifically that is omitted.
Yes. And we'll talk about why.
Yes. So let's just jump right into it. Let's start with our honorable mentions. Joey, what is your honorable mention?
My
fight?
honorable mention fight is from the Acolyte very recently.
There is some good lightsaber stuff in
OMG, there are. And I had a tough time choosing between the two of them, but I settled on Master Soul versus Chimere, specifically the duel in that series finale, frowny face, on Brendok. And the reason I picked this one, I loved it so much, is that not only was it these two cool characters that had absolutely amazing lightsaber fights, some of the best that we've seen in the whole saga, it had that personal stake. Like, they were truly, like, you felt like they were fighting for their lives.
Right, and we don't normally see that in Star Wars. I mean, and most of the time we don't. Like, how many lightsaber duels do we watch where both people make it out?
Not many, and unless
we do see a lot.
I'm sorry, a lot, but like I think a lot of times, like you're saying, I'm sorry, I got my wires crossed.
Okay,
like someone in the lightsaber fight is not always like normally not trying to kill the other person.
No,
like they're kind of trying to toy with them.
It's
sometimes.
very elegant.
Yes,
it really is, and that's kind of the point of like lightsaber is an elegant weapon. We've seen it. Obi-Wan has said it. He actually makes a couple references to it throughout his time in both the original trilogy and in the prequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is this elegance where classy. It's a classy way to fight.
Yes.
This is not that. This is a street fight.
Yes. And I one of my favorite parts about it, two things, is first, the use of like non-traditional ways of doing the lightsabers. Like Master Soul shut his lightsaber off a lot.
Yeah.
And used the act of turning it off and on as like a fighting style, which I thought was awesome. Mm-hmm. And then the stranger Chimere splitting his lightsaber in two, which we saw previously in the series. But
R.I.P. Jackie.
Ah, man, and Yord.
Three moments of silence.
Oh dear, that was unnecessary. But it, I just loved it so much, and the use of the Force in it too, with Master Soul like pushing, like you know, doing that cool push. I just loved it. I'm kind of wishing I put it higher, but as we go through,
I'm going to be some pretty good ones up there.
I know. I think this is appropriate where it belongs. The Acolyte was fantastic. Master Soul is fantastic. How about your honorable mention, Dan?
If you know anything about me, my favorite character is Count Dooku, so I had to throw Count Dooku one on here.
Not the one I expected.
Not the one you would expect. This is Dooku versus the Night Sisters from the Clone Wars. So a little background to this. The Night Sisters were going to ambush Dooku in his palace, and they kind of blind him, disorient him, and then they go invisible, which is really a double whammy. They dress as Jedis in hopes of, like a false flag, getting the Jedi against Count Dooku. He 3-on-1s them in his super sweet PJs.
That's how I would play as him in Battlefront. And jammies.
No, me too. I paid for it. I'm using it.
It's great.
And again, he is known as a master duelist, arguably one of the best in Star Wars lore, and he gets to show it here.
That's part of my favorite thing about the Clone Wars is it really like allowed Dooku to shine as a villain and shine in a way that like, there was some of that weirdness with Christopher Lee being a little older and was, they had to put his head on a double for the lightsaber fights. I think this kind of stripped a lot of that away.
Yeah.
And really let you see like super powerful Sith Lord.
Yeah. No.
And Night Sisters are awesome.
Yeah. And what he does is, again, blind against invisible people, just strictly using the Force.
It's awesome.
It is. We really get to see how strong he is with the Force, how powerful the dueler he is. And Ventress is in this one too, right?
I think so.
So he's fighting against Ventress, somebody that he's trained.
It's so cool.
It really is. Great fight. Underrated lightsaber duel in my
Great
opinion.
representation of why Duke is your favorite character, I think.
Yes.
It's like a picture perfect reason as to why.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump right into my number 5. And that is Luke versus Darth Vader in The Return of the Jedi.
It's a classic.
It is. It is classic. The choreography isn't as advanced as we've seen and we will talk about in some of the other ones. But the meaning behind this one and the dialogue that really is going on during this one really is what puts it in my top 5 of Luke's "I don't want to fight you," Vader doing it, Palpatine being the cheerleader in his throne,
Mm-hmm.
really not caring who wins.
No, he wins either way, or so he thinks.
Yeah. So
It's a fantastic battle. I think it is my favorite of the original trilogy. Spoiler alert: there's no original trilogy fights on my list, which is fine. But
I'm shocked.
I love the original
was me
trilogy.
grasping my pearls. Like, I cannot believe he said that.
I love the original trilogy, but we've advanced in lightsaber fights.
We have.
But this one, the meaning behind it, you're right, is
and
so
that's,
powerful.
That's really kind of how I pick mine.
Uh-huh.
There is just some cool choreography, but not as much. This one.
This is
Very basic, very talky.
It is. The first time we see a lightsaber thrown.
Yeah, that was sweet.
And you're going to be buying the Lego set of this soon, right?
I will.
Before they retire it.
I will, yeah.
It'll probably be on sale in Black Friday.
Once it goes on sale.
Again.
Which could be tomorrow.
Could be. Might be.
Probably will be.
Anything else to add on this one?
No, I could talk about it all day.
I love it. I think it's an excellent choice. But that brings me to my number 5, which is Ahsoka versus Darth Vader in Rebels.
Yeah.
I can't believe this is a number 5, but you'll see why shortly. But I just remember, watching Rebels as it aired, and progressively getting more and more attached to it, thinking it was so much cooler.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we see Anakin / Vader and Ahsoka from the clone, after building their relationship in the Clone Wars, seeing them lightsaber fight as Darth Vader and Ahsoka was absolutely wild.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was I just remember being so nervous about the way they handled it at the end. It just was so good and so powerful. Kind of much like we're talking about with this other fight with Darth Vader. I think one of the most interesting things to do with Darth Vader is to put him against people who care about him.
Oh, and we will see that quite a bit.
Yes, sir.
I do have a question, though, about this.
Okay.
Do you think Vader was pulling punches?
At first. I think he was at first, and then I think when we saw his eye kind of shift,
yeah,
I think that's when it was I'm gonna kill her.
Yeah, I have to. She's gonna kill me.
And I was saddened and frustrated by the fact that she couldn't turn him, but I like that. Really, these two are great to be paired together because it highlights that Luke is and I imagine Leia could have as well.
Yeah,
but I think this highlights that only one of his children could have been the person to turn him. And you see Obi-Wan not able to do it. Yeah. You see Ahsoka not able to do it. Really paving the way and highlighting the importance of the Skywalker twins.
Yes. And this is a theme we're gonna come back to in a little bit, maybe.
I really am happy with these two together. I didn't really think about that as we were doing it. But that brings me to my number 4, which I'm very excited to talk about. And that is Rey versus Kylo Ren in The Rise of Skywalker. But not the big one that you might be thinking of where they're fighting on the remains of Death Star 2. I'm particularly talking about the one on Kijimi.
Ooh.
And if you listen to our Lego sets we went from the sequels episode, this is one of them. And you might have heard me kind of pull my punches.
Yeah. Because
I wanted to gush about it here. I think this is one of the most unique lightsaber fights we've seen ever.
Yeah.
In the sense that these two people are in 2 very, very different locations on the same planet, but they're in 2 different locations. And because of the connection they have in that dyad, you really get to see them, kind of seem as if that they're kind of out of time and space, but also in both places and nowhere at the same time. It's just awesome. And I love the idea of the dyad. I really wanted it to come up in the Acolyte.
And this really highlights it too, of just how powerful it is. Because like you said, they are just going between settings.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways that they accomplish that later on with different people.
Mm-hmm.
But then this is just so different.
It is. And again, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
It just sets the tone of just how intertwined these two are. Because they kind of hint at it in Force Awakens, there's something there. And then in The Rise of, it just builds out The Last Jedi. And then we get this Force dyad.
This really is the kind of I think the pinnacle of the Well, the pinnacle of the Force diet is her handing him the lightsaber, but like
This
them as enemies.
This sets it up to
Yes. And I think like for me, why it's so powerful is like you often see Rey in confrontations with Kylo Ren where they're either of them are like emotionally like Rey's obviously not happy right now in this fight,
be.
but
She
like
looks pretty angry.
they like I think one or both of them are like unstable emotionally when they're fighting usually.
They're like two teenagers going at it. In high
They
school.
are. And I think this one is the most like they're both confident in what they're doing. They're not emotionally out of whack yet.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I think this is just one of my favorite. It's a smaller battle, but it's one of my favorites. And again, I could talk about this for a while. But that takes us to your number 4, Dan.
My number 4 is from the prequel trilogy, and it is Yoda versus Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. This is kind of a crazy one, in my opinion.
It really is.
We setting the scene, just saw Palpatine wax 4 Jedi Masters. No problem.
Relatively easily.
Like, did not break a sweat. Just turned Anakin. He's really feeling himself.
Recovering from a lightning attack, too. Let's not forget about that.
And then Yoda strolls in, who also shows an immense force display by just throwing the guards against the wall. And then we get to see this amazing fight that just spanned the course of the Senate building. Well, when it gets into the chamber and Palpatine's like spinning the pods, whatever you're going to call them, throwing them, and Yoda's climbing up. Such a good fight.
I remember when I was like younger watching this, I so badly wanted Yoda to win. And I don't know why I thought like maybe if I watched it again, it would change and Yoda would win. But prior to the introduction of, the sequel trilogy, Disney Plus shows, all that, this would have been on my list for certain.
Yeah.
It's not fallen in its greatness. It's wonderful, but I've just had things come more powerful for me. Mm-hmm. But I think this is an excellent choice and so unique. Much like, I think we're kind of accidentally pairing these up really well.
Yeah.
Where these are both have really unique elements. Like that Senate chamber is such a cool place to have a fight.
And it's the first time where, at least in my opinion, I'm like, oh, the Jedi actually might not make it out of this one.
You felt that Yoda was struggling.
He was, and he did. We saw him get thrown and get hit.
Like and rarely do we see like fully just a straight up loss by the hero.
Yeah.
And this is a fantastic example of that.
The beginning of the end, like for the Jedi.
Yeah.
At this point, at least for me, I'm like, okay, this is over.
Yeah.
The all powerful Yoda just gets beaten.
And I like that it happens thematically in the Senate chamber where it's like Palpatine manipulated and did a whole bunch of like non-physical overpowering people in the Senate chamber.
Yeah.
But here he's physically doing it. And it's like
literally using the weapons of the people, metaphorically, where they were sitting, the people who he manipulated, throwing them at Yoda. And now that might be an English teacher theory.
We sometimes get intellectual.
Like, why are the curtains blue? Favorite color was blue. But I really enjoyed this fight. I could watch it all day.
I think I'm going to want to go watch all of these on YouTube.
They are good. We could just make a compilation.
Maybe so. All right, you ready?
Yeah, so that brings me to my number 3. And another one from the Clone Wars. And that is Ahsoka versus Darth Maul in the throne room on Mandalore.
It's so good.
It is so good. I remember watching this when it came out. The fight choreography, the dialogue. It almost seemed like they didn't want to be fighting each other. They really both kind of felt like they had no reason.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of made it known. So Maul's like, I wanted Kenobi and they sent you. And he's pretty much, I think he said like, you're not even a real Jedi. And she said, you're half a Sith.
I think like this is one of those great like alternative reality what would have happened moments for me where it's like, what if she actually joined him? Like would they have been able to stop? Like that aside, I just think like, they like did the like actual mocapping of the choreography.
Oh yeah, I remember watching it.
It's just like the fact that they managed to tap into the physicality of Darth Maul using Ray Park was just so good. And like the meaning behind it, again, it's like this feels like it could be in Revenge of the Sith. It's that important.
And it just timing wise, it is. Like,
yeah.
And it really does match it. And with Maul saying the whole time, like, oh, you better be careful. Mm-hmm. This isn't going to end well the way you think it is.
Because he knows exactly what the plan is.
He knows. Maul just seems like one of those characters who really doesn't care about anything but himself. Mm-hmm. Much like Dooku in that sense. They're go in tandem very often. Both of which straight up tell the heroes, hey, Here's the deal.
This is what's going to happen.
This is what's happening, and we can stop it if we work together. And the Jedi are like, no, you're so wrong. We're so much better than you.
And I don't think necessarily that the Sith are having the purest of intentions.
Oh, they're definitely not.
But I really, this is one where it is like, I think they may have been able to stop Palpatine. Who knows where Anakin or something.
Right. Especially
but I don't know, who knows what Maul would have done. But
yeah.
But these two are powerful.
And it parallels Dooku and Obi-Wan so well of, you're going to want to stop this.
Yeah.
And they're both like, no.
Mm-hmm. Can I talk about my favorite thing about this before you wrap up talking about it? There's a part where Ahsoka knocks him out of like a stained glass window, and it has like a Looney Tune type silhouette where like his lightsaber passed through it, and you can just see like 2 lines. Silly detail, but I loved it. This is fantastic though. Like
it's, I could rewatch this all day.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to your number 3.
My number 3, which is Rey versus Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. If you are new to us, I am a massive, massive, massive fan of the sequels. And while I know, like, I wish that, like, the lightsaber fights got better and better and better, I think the peak of lightsaber fighting in the sequels was this fight in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
For so many reasons. The stage is set. These characters are so emotionally driven at this point, which I told you was a strength of the other one. But I think, or, you know, a weakness of, you know, sometimes these potentially. But I think they're both so raw and emotional because of what just happened with Han Solo.
Right.
That first having the fight with Finn really builds up to this tension. And you see the lightsaber wiggle in the snow. And then it goes to Rey. That was one of, like, the most chilling moment. Like, I get chills thinking about it even still. And then you end up with this lightsaber fight where we talked about how, like, flashy and elegant the prequel fights are, or and the Acolyte kind of channels that. What I love about this is that it feels like two people who haven't really done this much before. They don't really know what's happening.
Yeah.
Kylo Ren's kind of pulling his punches because he wants to teach her, but also he kind of seems a little unstable because he just killed his dad and he got shot.
That's the part I think a lot of people forget, because one of the big critiques of the sequel lightsaber duels, is that Rey's a Mary Sue because she picks up a lightsaber and is holding her own. No, he is incredibly weak, both physically and emotionally. Mm-hmm. She is fueled by hate right now.
And she spent her whole life fighting. Maybe not with a lightsaber, but I think it's a perfect storm of why this would happen the way it does.
It's just adrenaline on both sides. It's just pumping.
Mm-hmm. And it just, like, the setting was so unique. Seeing those two, like, lightsaber, the picture we have on the screen here, if you're watching the video version, isn't as dramatic, but, like, when you see, like, the dark forest and the snow falling and just their blades, like, sticking out, it's so fantastic.
Really highlights just them.
Yes, and it's such a great start to what happens with them. It's just wonderful, wonderful lightsaber battle. I, often have to stow a lot of my Lego sets and different Star Wars pieces of merchandise because, space and whatnot, but this is a Lego set that I consistently keep out because I just love it so much and what, the scene represents.
Oh, yeah.
Ready for my number 2?
I am. I'm excited for your number 2.
My number 2 is a newer one, and that is from Ahsoka, and that is Ahsoka versus Anakin in The World Between Worlds. Recognizing, again, this is one where it's not really happening. It's a she doesn't necessarily know that, but it's a kind of a vision. We don't necessarily know exactly how it worked, but seeing them have this fight intercut between these awesome flashbacks and seeing Hayden Christensen get to use a lightsaber again, seeing Anakin in his episode 3 outfit with the red lightsaber, it's like wish fulfillment on every level.
It is.
It's just so, so, so powerful from a story and action perspective, which and you can kind of see the through line between the things that we put on this list. They moved us emotionally.
Yes.
And that's kind of why, like, it doesn't get on this list just because it's cool.
Yeah.
There's a reason. These all are cool, but there's a reason that it's here. And this, for me, paralleling that Rebels fight, which I loved. And that's the Rebels fight would have potentially been in this position if this didn't happen. But actually seeing the, like, live action versions of these, specifically with having Hayden Christensen back, using The World Between Worlds, it was just glorious, in my opinion.
It was. I remember watching it for the first time. Like, is this really happening? Are we seeing Anakin with the red lightsaber?
And like the crackle between Vader and Anakin.
It's like the what if Anakin won?
Mm-hmm. And I do think that this kind of sets the stage to see more Anakin potentially in Ahsoka. I think so. My God, it just was. This really, really, really did it for me. I was very, very happy with the way that it worked. I think Rosario Dawson and stunt double. I don't know exactly how it fully works there, but whoever is doing the fight choreography, it feels like Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's Anakin, Hayden Christensen. It's just knocked it out of the park for me.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. Ready for your number 2?
I am. And my number 2 is from the original trilogy. I'm sure nobody's surprised. And that is Luke versus Darth Vader on Bespin in The Empire Strikes Back.
A classic.
This is. And this is... Because I asked you earlier, do you think Vader's pulling punches? Here, he absolutely is pulling
150%.
It's like a kid who's learning how to do something for the first time. It's like, Dad, let's do it. It's like, I'm sure you challenge your dad. Like, It's something like, let's go play basketball. And your dad's like, okay.
Yeah.
And just Luke's raw emotion in this. And Vader kind of just brushing him off like, yeah, good job. And then it gets the incredible revelation of who Darth Vader actually is after, Luke gets his arm cut off. But
that's no stranger to the bloodline.
No, it's
Cutting limbs off.
It's a rite of passage.
It is.
But just the meaning, this isn't one of the best choreographed fights. Just the meaning behind this fight. And I think it really just shows where each character is in their progression. Where Luke really doesn't have that much experience with the lightsaber. He's been to Dagobah. He has some training. He knew that he was going to have to fight Vader at some point.
And I think that his weakness here speaks to how much, the lesson of the movie, Luke rushing. And that's kind of Luke's whole MO, is that he's always looking and like trying to speed things up. And this is like the fruit of that, is him getting his butt kicked by Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I do want to say, you mentioned that it's not the most strong choreography with respect to like everything that's available now. It was a notable and substantial improvement over episode 4.
Yeah, even that too was, not gonna.
That was 2 old guys whacking a stick around. It is better than that, but this was a notable jump from that.
It really highlighted like, oh, this might not end well.
Mm-hmm. It's among the grimmest lightsaber fights in the,
Yeah.
maybe not morbid, but Luke straight up loses. Like,
and like we kind of talked about earlier, you don't see that very often of the heroes just getting beat.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those times.
A very, very powerful and iconic demonstration of that too.
And I feel like this, at least if you're watching the video, this picture is probably one of the most iconic stills from that movie.
I mean, it's on blankets, it's on mugs, it's on every shirts. I think I have a shirt with that on it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm ready to move into number 1.
Yeah, we have a little unique of a situation that ended up here for number 1.
I think nobody's surprised.
No. What's our number 1? Together, we for once have a unified number 1, because I don't think that either of us wanted to put anything other than it as number 1.
Yes.
Go ahead, tell us what it is.
That is the Battle of the Heroes, Obi-Wan versus Anakin on Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so long.
As it should be, because it gets intercut.
Uh-huh.
Which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's intercut with the Yoda one.
Yeah. Uh-huh. There's a lot going on.
It really is, as I'm going to throw something out there that we're going to address in a little bit. The Duel of the Fates.
Mm-hmm.
It is for the survival of the Jedi Order.
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan and Yoda both need to win. And we get this incredibly choreographed fight. Jumping, moving across Mustafar, the lava.
I mean, it is so like, just the straight up location is insane with the lava planet, but like the difference in where they're fighting. Like they go from just a normal room all the way through floating down a lava river on these droids. It's just so varied. And we talked about the Hayden Christensen isms with the lightsabers. Like, just the way that he fights is so satisfying to watch.
Yeah.
And Ewan McGregor also does such a fantastic job as Obi-Wan fighting.
And you know that scene where people talk, they're just swinging their lightsaber. Like, apparently that's a thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's very common if you train with somebody for a long time, like, you'll be able to predict what they're doing. And apparently that is a move in like fencing or sparring or something.
I saw some sort of tweet or article about this where you can, like, if you don't anticipate them to do it, you kind of like build your momentum back up to do another sort of attack. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they just
it's so good. We're clearly both big fans of this, and it's just such a perfect culmination. I think Anakin's turn may come a little abruptly if you don't watch the Clone Wars, but I think this is a great example of Anakin being turned. Like, it shows that he truly is gone.
This is Darth Vader.
Yes.
Whether it's still Anakin, but it is Darth Vader. It is the first and only time we get to see Darth Vader go full power, not in a suit.
Mm-hmm. It's just, this was always my favorite as a kid. As an adult, it still is my favorite. And I think you can clearly see that I try to be very, 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 very open-minded with the newer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it often works for me. It really resonates with me. And I understand if it doesn't for everyone, but I just don't know what would take the place of this. It would have to be so good.
Yeah.
Because I have the nostalgia goggles, and it's just straight up so good.
There are very few fights that actually mean as much as this one did.
Mm-hmm.
When you were watching this for the first time again, you really feel like this is it. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like one of these characters is going to likely die,
not make it out,
and it's going to dramatically affect the state of the galaxy.
Yeah,
it's wild. It's such a good fight, and like really looking back on it and thinking about how good it is, you know, as you're a kid, it's like, oh, cool, flashy lightsaber fight. It's so cool. But like the meaning and like really starting to understand why it happens is just so fantastic.
And their emotional states between the two of them as it's happening, of the you wronged me versus you are wrong. That this duality that we get. And
I think I always talk about, you know, whenever we're talking about Jedi, like the perfect Jedi, like what is the perfect Jedi? And I think Obi-Wan is about as good as it gets. Like he remains so calm and he tries to not let his emotions get the best of him. And the only time you really seem like he seems like he lets the emotions get through is after he's
done.
He's cut Anakin's limbs off.
Yeah, that is the only time Obi-Wan really shows emotion. Like raw, just anger and sadness.
It's like he didn't allow it to influence his actions. No. But then as soon as it was what he perceived to be done, he like just, you know, let it out. And what I think is interesting is like maybe the right thing to do in this case would have been to like take Anakin out.
Double tap.
But he could not bring himself to do it. And you see the downstream effects of that.
Yeah.
Wild.
It is incredible. You could rewatch that on repeat. And one thing we have not mentioned for any of these is the soundtrack.
Yeah.
As these are going on, you are getting, the music is making these fights so much more dramatic. I mean, I'm thinking of the song just looking at this picture.
I like, you can't not, if you've watched it as many times as most crazy Star Wars people have. It's just like you can hear it. And one thing I did want to point out here is looking at our list on a big picture, there's a very common thread through a lot of these, and it's Anakin / Darth Vader. Yeah. It's like he's in the coolest fights.
He might be the coolest character.
I mean,
objectively the coolest
seriously,
character.
And again, I think we found a lot of really interesting things as we've moved through the list. We assemble these lists separately and don't really talk about them much.
We try not to.
No, as best as possible, not to have repeats is really it, but like really seeing what resonates with us. It's very similar throughout. Like whether it's from the sequels, from the prequels, from the originals, from an animated show, from a Disney Plus show, they all kind of, what works. And I think that's the power of Star Wars. It's not, you know, all the noise around it can cloud things. And that's part of why we're doing the series, is to say there's things to love about Star Wars, regardless of what you like as your favorite form of Star Wars.
Exactly. Now, we would be remiss if we did not bring up one glaring omission.
Very glaring.
And that is the Duel of the Fates.
Episode 1, Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan.
The scene in Naboo where Darth Maul ignites his second blade for the first time. And Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are like, that's kind of weird.
The heck is this?
That was a fantastic fight. The music, I think my hot take is the music really makes that fight more so than anywhere else. And
the concept of having the one person with two blades against two people, each with one blade, it is cool and really unique. But I think for me, like like you call this the Duel of the Fates, I can get that. But I think if you've ever watched the Dave Filoni, I think it was in the Mandalorian, like behind the scenes thing, he talks about how the Duel of the Fates was, you know, that truly was the Duel of the Fates, where if Qui-Gon won, he would have trained Anakin and would have, the whole trajectory of the galaxy would have been very different. Yeah. But that's harder to see, you know, from a distance.
You need a lot more information. And looking back after watching the Clone Wars, episode 2, episode 3, all the way up through episode 6, it's hard to picture. Like, why? How does this one thing have such a butterfly effect?
And it 100% does.
Oh.
But it's so it's almost abstract in like the alternatives, and like 100% it is Duel of the Fates, but I think that emotional weight is not as apparent.
I don't think you had time to get connected to the characters.
No.
I feel like so the last time we really seen Anakin before episode 1 was when Sebastian Shaw took the helmet off.
Mm-hmm.
That is our only exposure to Anakin. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That is true.
We
And Force Ghost, but
we just didn't have that attachment.
no, because you were attached to Darth Vader, not the person that became Darth Vader.
Right, and that's when it kind of going back, especially when we talk about the sequels of the sequels with the prequels and where we're going. The additional material really fleshes things out and makes you care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're going with the current Star Wars. We are getting to the sequels. We are fleshing them out right now. And I think Duel of Fates is very beneficial of that. Of
Yes.
getting to see the fall of Anakin.
And it emphasizing its importance. Like, it's almost like you don't realize it's important as you're... How important. Like, it obviously, they make a big spectacle out of it, but you don't realize how important it is until it's too late.
The symbolism of Qui-Gon's death.
Yes.
Ooh, I have another honorable mention. Can we talk about it
Go
real
ahead.
quick? The sequel to Duel of the Fates. Obi-Wan versus Maul on Tatooine
Oh.
in Rebels.
I love that in that it's like it's almost not a fight.
It's so simplistic.
Uh-huh.
If you haven't seen it, Sam Witwer talks about it. He walks you through it.
Please look that up. It's very powerful.
It's a very brief video, but he just describes it so well. So I like that follow-up to it.
Yeah, no, they book in each other well, and I'm happy we got to mention those and talk about them as honorable mentions because they do pair really well together, and I think it's a great example of the importance story-wise beyond just it being cool, the progression of those two things, and it really fits those two characters.
Right.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't think we would have as an attachment to Duel of Fates if we haven't gotten Maul.
Yes.
Later on.
Uh-huh. And it is 100% cool, but I think the through line of all their stuff here is that the most powerful ones are more than just cool. They're all cool. Yes. But they have this deep emotional connection to the story that makes it so important.
And at least for us, we picked the ones where we didn't have to think as hard about it. We don't have to make as many reaches. Like we could see the importance of all of these fights at the time.
Yeah, like I didn't have to think too hard about this personally. Like I just thought about what resonated most with me. Can I make one other little comment about? I really wanted to put the Rise of Skywalker, battle on Death Star 2 wreckage, Kylo and Rey in, and I think John Williams made a very active choice to not include much music in that. Mm-hmm. And I personally think it's kind of missing. Like if you play Duel of the Fates or, one of these other songs on top of that, it has that epic feeling. But I think the choice to lean away from that, not make the next big thing and do, let it be more organic, hear the water, hear the metal creaking, which does have, important story significance for it. I think it does kind of almost drop it down a little for me.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And I said something negative about the sequels. There you go.
Who, me? Or you?
I said I did. It never happens. I'm just kidding. All Star Wars is imperfect. It's just what you get out of them that's important.
Yeah, the only perfect Star Wars is Return of the Jedi. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I'm just kidding.
I do want to, again, I kind of touched on this a little earlier. The whole point of this series is it was spawned off of some of the negativity surrounding the Acolyte. We want to point out that regardless of what is your favorite, you cannot make the argument that Star Wars is dead. Star Wars is 100% alive, and it's this broad, far-reaching saga that has different components that speak to everyone differently. And I think it's important to emphasize that, important to say Star Wars is more alive now than it ever has been. There's more Star Wars than there ever has been, and hopefully there will continue to be. We love Star Wars. We hope that you do too. Mm-hmm. And we want to hear from you. Is there something that we left off the list that we didn't, include as an honorable mention, or, talk about it a little bit after? Yeah. Is there something that you might have got wrong, or you think we might have gotten wrong? Something that you would change, or tell us anything that you're thinking of as you're listening to this. We really appreciate your feedback and input. Yeah. Anything else to add, Dan?
No, let us know. We want to know. We like feedback.
We do like feedback. And tell us we're crazy again. I always say that. But with that,
we get tired of telling each other.
Well, because we know that's the problem. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. We really, really appreciate your time. Please consider giving us a like or a subscription on YouTube, or a review and subscription on the podcast platform of your choice. Please consider giving us a follow on Twitter or X at Blue Shadow Pod, or on Instagram at Blue Shadow Podcast. And with that, we thank you once again for listening. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thanks, guys.